So our next speaker is William Jackson. He works at Zanoprima, and he's in charge of the process research and development and manufacturing. He has a background as a chemist and have worked in both the pharmaceutical industry and the chemical sector. And the title of his talk is Introduction to Zanoprima's Synthetic Nicotine.
Hi, I'd like to introduce you to Zanoprima's synthetic nicotine. Zanoprima was founded by Ashok Narasimhan, who was the first to introduce nicotine replacement therapy products into India. There was a request from GlaxoSmithKline in about 2012 to produce synthetic nicotine, which would be fully traceable for the pharmaceutical applications of Nicorette. At the time, neither technology, though the market was in place, but this all changed with the development of the vaping market in 2014-2015. As a consequence, Zanoprima started looking at methods for manufacturing synthetic nicotine. The best of these was the conversion of myosmin through to ethanol nicotine and then through to nicotine using an enzyme called an amine reductase. So basically what we had is reduction of myosmin and a consequential oxidation of glucose to gluconolactone. So we had a very efficient catalytic system, which was done in water at ambient or slightly elevated temperatures. So what we had here was a process which was consistent with green chemistry objectives. So we had a catalytic process, water as solvent, low temperatures, renewable resources such as glucose and enzymes, highly biodegradable byproducts such as the gluconolactone, and a high recovery of the organic solvent which is used for the extraction. So what we wanted to do was to look and to see the environmental consequences of our process compared to tobacco-derived nicotine. Fortunately, there was a paper from 2018 from the Imperial College Group which looked at tobacco production and its environmental footprint, and we were able to extract the data required from that. For our own process, we had to go back right to basic chemicals in order to look at the starting materials for our myosmin for looking at our own process. So what was found from that analysis by Atlantic Consulting in Switzerland is that the process we had was much better than either flue-cured tobacco, this is from the dust of cigarette production, or from actual tobacco leaves grown exclusively in India for the extraction of nicotine. So this was air-cured tobacco. So at the 2% level, we were about 8% better with the flue-cured, fuel-cured product, or about 3 times better than the air-cured product. If we look at water, then the effect is even more dramatic. The Zanoprima process, in fact, actually produces water in the manufacturing process, whereas there is a huge use of water in the growing of tobacco, whether it's for flue-cured or whether it's for air-cured extraction processes. So, in summary, what we have is that Zanoprima has developed a cost-effective process for the manufacture of S-nicotine, which is devoid of related alkaloids, tobacco-specific nitrosamines, heavy metals, and pesticide or herbicide residues. In addition, the process, as requested, offers full traceability and is manufactured in an FDA-inspected pharmaceutical facility. The process offers also key ESG advantages when we compare it to tobacco, which is grown exclusively for nicotine extraction, or even that which is as a byproduct of cigarette production. So thank you for your time. Bayer.
Thank you, William. I hand the word to you.
Thanks very much. We have had some updates since I first did this presentation, and there are some hard copies available here. But basically, a few things that weren't said there is that pharmaceutical grade nicotine we consider as 99.8% pure. But in reality, we should be calling this big tobacco nicotine, because the pharmaceutical companies, in our experience, are using subcontractors who are using nicotine which is much less pure because it's cheaper and their margins are being squeezed. So that's one thing to consider. When we look at the environmental footprint here, the key thing in this, which wasn't mentioned, is nitrous oxide. Now, nitrous oxide isn't used in our process. Our bit is very clean. It's the bits before that, i.e. for making nicotinic acid, niacin, which is a huge, huge product in the world. That produces nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide has 270 times the power of carbon dioxide to deplete ozone. So as a consequence, what has happened subsequently, and our person did an update on the report recently, what he was found was that nitric acid production was 20% of the global production of the environmental footprint of the chemicals industry. As a consequence, what's happened is there's been scrubbing of the nitrous oxide from the nitric acid, and as such, it's made our process about 13% less in its environmental impact. Now, there was a plant in Visp which was producing 50% of the world's nicotinic acid, owned by Lonza. And again, that was producing 3% of Switzerland's carbon footprint. And as a consequence, they have also had to scrub that. That would bring the footprint down another 35%. But unfortunately, because nicotinic acid is produced in India, which is where we have our pharmaceutical producer, we cannot use imported material and have to use it from India, which is not scrubbed. So there is a potential in the future to bring the footprint down from about 108 kilos of carbon dioxide down to about 60. So that's something to consider. Another aspect which wasn't mentioned in the ESG was actually the child labour aspects. I don't know whether people are aware, there was a big Swedish radio study on child labour in the tobacco industry just before the new year. And so this is another thing, because it's in a pharmaceutical plant, obviously we've been investigated to make sure there's no child labour there, and I can assure you that there isn't. But this is still something to take into consideration in all this. Last point before we end is that both BAT and PMI, other companies, have got an environmental study going on. They want to reduce their footprint by 2030, 2032. So they're actually looking at water reduction in their tobacco growing processes. Anyway, so open for questions now.
Thank you, William. Do we have questions from the audience? Then I have a question. Very often when we talk about synthetic nicotine, there's a question on R and S nicotine. Yeah. You mentioned S nicotine here, but do you want to elaborate a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give the handout there. The original process for... Sorry, I've given the handout there with it, just summarise it, just for completeness. The original process, obviously, which was launched in the US, was from Next Generation Labs, which produced a mixture of R and S isomers. Subsequent to that, people found what they could do is there's an old process for separating out paroxetine into its chiral forms using dibenzoyl tartaric acid. And so what people did is take the R and S mixture to separate out the S isomer from the R isomer using this dibenzoyl tartrate. The problem with that is that the yield is only 25 to 30%, depending how much of the R isomer you want to get rid of. Now, you'll see quite often in the literature a figure of 0.02%. The truth is, when we actually analyse products which contain nicotine manufactured by this, what you're finding is it's about 1.2, 1.3% of the R isomer in there. If you're using enzymatic processes, we're somewhere between 0.1 to 0.3% of the R isomer. So when you consider the tobacco plant has about 0.6 to 0.9, it's a significant reduction there. And again, once you've got the enzyme, it is fixed. There's no variation. It's that every time. So our process will produce 0.2% of the R isomer every time we make it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, William.